Hello, I'm Barbara Kay, and I'm hosting this evening. I'm emceeing. Thank you all for coming. Really glad to see so many of my friends here, and I really appreciate your coming out for this event. So I want to begin, first of all, by thanking Kyle Matthews, Kyle, there you are, and the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies for their partnership and support for this program, and especially for the use of this boardroom as our venue. I'd also like to thank my Toronto-based committee members, Karen Goldenberg over there, Chair of Project Abraham, former Montrealer Carrie Katz, where are you? Hello. And of course, Project Abraham representatives, Debbie Rose, and who's Executive Director of MozuudRSVP, and Gary Rose, Communications Director, for their professionalism and attention to detail in making things come together tonight. Many thanks as well to my good friend, Dr. Roy Epen, Dr. Roy, as we know him, as he's known to the many beneficiaries of his generosity for his considerable donation in defraying expenses for tonight. Thanks, Dr. Roy. MozuudRSVP, which helps to resettle victims of persecution, with Project Abraham focused on resettlement and support for victims of ISIS, is a not-for-profit organization created under the auspices of the Mozuud Freedom Foundation. Dedicated to bringing Yazidi victims of genocide to Canada, they proudly boast over 250 volunteers who support Yazidi families with their settlement into Canadian society and further help to improve their quality of life as they integrate. Finally, in terms of preamble, I would like to extend a special welcome to Steve Mayman. Steve, stand up. Come on. Steve, a Montreal businessman driven by a deep humanitarian calling, in 2015 founded the organization The Liberation of Christian and Yazidi Children of Iraq to relieve the plight of Assyrian Christians and Yazidis in thrall to ISIS, in particular finding success in ransoming many Yazidi girls and women from sex slavery. His passionate advocacy has been widely recognized, and we are very pleased and honored to have him with us tonight. I first became drawn to the Yazidi situation because their story had so many parallels with the history of my own people, the Jews. Like the Jews, the Yazidis are both an ethnic and a religious group, an ancient indigenous people in the Middle East. Like the Jews, they are monotheists, they do not proselytize, they bear no ill will to other religions and ask merely to live unmolested in their own sacred spaces. Over the centuries, the Yazidis have suffered many genocides, and today they are a fragile people, estimated at perhaps 1 million in population, half of them still in Iraq, the rest scattered among the nations. They have, over the centuries, been reviled and persecuted for no good reason. In fact, the present disaster at the hands of Islamic State is the 74th genocide the Yazidi people have suffered throughout their long history, including having lost 350,000 members of their community alongside the Armenians at the hands of the Turks between 1914 and 18. Sinjar, their ancestral home, is still a war zone and is uninhabitable. But unlike the Jews, the Yazidis have no diaspora to support them in their hour of need. It is no coincidence, therefore, that the Jewish community in Toronto has responded so disproportionately to their dire situation. A few months ago, I attended an information meeting on the Yazidis in Toronto. Present were several Yazidi women from London, Ontario, along with their pastor and community leader, Mirza Ismail. I interviewed 2 of the women. Through Mirza, as translator, they told me their stories of capture by ISIS and the sex slavery they endured for long months. It was very difficult to hear these stories and to keep asking questions, as they were both under terrible stress in recounting the details. One, who I called Nada in a column about this event, was passed around to 13 men, even though she had 2 children and was theoretically supposed to be exempted from sex slavery. Her first owner eventually bought her back. She fell pregnant and gave birth to a baby girl who was given to her owner's family. Nada was eventually made wife to an Iraqi fighter. She told me that he would often put a gun to her head or pretend to hang her children to keep her submissive. He would constantly tell her, "You are an infidel and you are dirty." But all her captors said those things constantly, including their kinswomen. Nada and her children were forced to watch 4 men being beheaded. Eventually, because Nada speaks fluent Arabic and could pass as Muslim, she was able to escape with her children and contact family members in Kurdistan, who paid for smugglers to take them there. Canada accepted Nada and her children, but not her father or sister. She has been living in London, Ontario for almost a year. And then Nada told me something that really disturbed me as a Canadian. She said she was on a bus one day and saw, several rows over, the man whom she instantly recognized as the ISIS fighter who had brokered her sale to other men and who had himself been her master for several months. They both got off at the same spot. She said that he looked at her, immediately covered his face, and ran off. What she told me next really shook me up. Nada went to the refugee center to report the incident. She told them the man's real name, as well as his Islamic State name. The official there responded that she was too traumatized to be sure of what she had seen. And then that person reportedly told her, "Don't tell anybody." This reaction could have been due to a reflexive fear of the public finding out that at least one terrorist had infiltrated himself into the refugee program. We would be naive to believe that only one did, I'm afraid. The London police contacted me after my column appeared and promised to investigate, but I have heard nothing since. I often think of Nada, forced constantly to think about this man, knowing he is actually living in proximity to her. I cannot even imagine the added stress that this brings her. I do not know if Nada or the other women who have endured similar ordeals will ever recover their mental or psychological health. All we can do is comfort them and hope they will heal enough to function in their roles as parents. And so we must concentrate our efforts on ensuring that their children have the best possible education and the most positive experience that Canada has to offer, to give them a foundation of trust in their environment and the people in it. And that is what Project Abraham strives to do. We hope you will gain knowledge and inspiration from tonight's program and be generous in your response.